Okay, so today's article is 24 states file an amicus brief to convince SCOTUS to ban trans girls from sports. And viewers of my channel know that I'm very torn about this because the studies are torn. The studies suggest that that male puberty might confer some permanent advantage to trans women. But, and there's a big but, and I'll get to it in this article. And I'm sure viewers of my channel can totally guess what the but is. But let's start from the beginning. Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall joined 23 other states in filing an amicus brief in support of banning trans girls from sports. Specifically, the brief asks the Supreme Court to review and overturn an injunction placed on Arizona's ban on transgender athletes by the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. Marshall wrote the brief alongside Arkansas Attorney General Tim Griffin and with support from Alaska, Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Virginia, and Wyoming. Wow. There we go. Now you can see my head. All right. The court instituted the injunction in September in a 3-0 decision in response to Arizona's Save Women's Sports Act, which enacted a blanket ban on transgender girls in girls' sports. And this is where the but comes in. Regardless of how long they've been transitioning and if they were on puberty blockers. Now, like I said, there is still conflicting studies as to whether male puberty confers some permanent advantage to trans women. But if you've been on puberty blockers, I'm sorry. I mean, since forever, little kids have been playing on the same team because prior to puberty, there is literally no difference between boys and girls. So this is basically saying that, yeah, boys and girls are different from the minute they're born. No. Anyway. The plaintiffs in the case were 2 trans girls and their parents suing to overturn the law. Judge Morgan Christian, who wrote the decision, said that the law permits all students other than transgender women and girls to play on teams consistent with their gender identities. Transgender women and girls alone are barred from doing so. This is the essence of discrimination. And again, no mention of trans men and trans boys. Which, we've seen with, what's his name, Mac Beggs, that, yeah, if a female transitions to a man, they're going to wipe the floor in girls' sports because they have that advantage. So I'm surprised that nobody's saying anything about trans boys. And yes, that is the essence of discrimination if you're only targeting one group. Now, like I said, there are conflicting studies about male puberty, but we're talking trans girls who haven't been through male puberty. So, what advantage do they have? The amicus brief makes several arguments in favor of banning transgender girls from sports. One such claim is that it would be expensive and difficult for schools to implement policies allowing trans girls to participate on girls' sports teams, an argument that ignores the ease with which many schools across the country have implemented trans-friendly policies. How is it expensive exactly? And difficult? I mean, somebody wants to join the team, you're like, okay, have a tryout. Hey, you're great, you're on the team. Exactly how is that more expensive and difficult? Where is the expense? Where is the difficulty? The brief also argues that sex is not equivalent to gender identity under the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. Oh, so now gender and sex are not the same thing? Okay, which is it, bigots? Are gender and sex the same, or are they not? A claim that ignores established precedent from the Supreme Court case Bostock versus Clayton County, which ruled that trans people are subject to sex-based protections due to their gender modality. The Attorney General then made two legal arguments. I don't like how my head is like, at least I look like a normal person. The Attorney General then made two legal arguments, claiming that the Circuit Court made its decision on erroneous grounds and that other readings of the law may be more plausible. They also argue that a rational basis review is required to determine if the plaintiff's claim is under-inclusive. This means that an additional overview, informed by constitutional law, would be done to determine if the argument being made is internally consistent with equal protection. If not, it would get thrown out. It is unclear whether these arguments will hold up in court. SCOTUS has given no public indication of whether it will take this case. It has already accepted the case of United States versus Skermetti, which will determine whether states can legally ban gender-affirming care for minors. Which I've mentioned many times that gender-affirming care happens for cis people as well. So if you're going to ban it for trans people, yeah, you're being discriminatory. There is no evidence that transgender girls have a significant biological advantage in sports. Rather, evidence suggests that transitioning levels the playing field. Exactly. Because, especially if they're on puberty blockers, so they never went through puberty, or that their gender dysphoria was just so bad that they no longer have the access to testosterone that a male would normally have, because they would just get it from their adrenal glands like cis women do, which is, they get testosterone, but not a lot. Which I found out that cis boys, well, all people, get some female hormones from the adrenal gland. So, males do get estrogen in their adrenal gland. So, just not a lot, obviously, because, just like, men get from their, males get it from their male parts. I can only assume that women get more estrogen from their female parts. I'm assuming. I do not know this for a fact, but it would make sense. Nevertheless, anti-trans sentiment continues to fuel the fight against trans rights. Our coalition is determined to preserve the 50 years of work that expand opportunities and level the playing field for girls and women in sports, A.G. Marshall said in a press release. All right, but as long as you're not trans. Because even though they don't have any natural advantage, they don't exist. Cool. But the left continues to pander to a small minority of their base. Parents of daughters are rightfully outraged at the loss of positions on teams and college scholarships. As our multiple briefs to the Supreme Court show, it's time to return to fairness and opportunity for sports. Now, I find this hilarious. On the one hand, he basically admitted that the number of trans women in sports is small. But yet there's this epidemic of cis women losing out to trans women. So which is it? Are we talking about a small minority? Or are we talking about a systemic problem of cis women and girls losing opportunities to trans women? Because you can't have it both ways. Either it's a small minority or it's an epidemic. One of these has to be right. It can't be both. So anyway, that is all I have for that article. So with that, I will see you guys in the next video.